August 16th, 1977, Graceland Mansion, Memphis, Tennessee. The king of rock and roll is hours away from death, and only one woman knows what he said in his final moments. She was 20 years old. She held his hand. She heard words that would haunt her for 4 decades. Words she swore she would never repeat. Words that revealed the truth about who Elvis Presley really was when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds went home. Those words stayed buried until now. Here is the story. It was the height of summer in Memphis. The kind of heat that sticks to your skin and won't let go. Inside Graceland, the air conditioning hummed, but it couldn't cool the tension that had been building for months. Elvis Presley was 42 years old, but his body was failing him, like he was twice that age. The mansion was quiet that afternoon, too quiet. The hangers-on, the Memphis Mafia, the entourage that normally filled every room with laughter and music, they were scattered. Some were upstairs, some had gone home. The parties that once raged until dawn had become painful memories. But this wasn't the Graceland of 1957 when Elvis was young and unstoppable. This was a tomb dressed up like a palace. Ginger Alden was there. She was Elvis's girlfriend, a beauty queen from Memphis who had won his heart just 9 months earlier. She was young, she was devoted, and she was terrified. Because she could see what everyone else refused to admit. Elvis was dying. He hadn't been himself in years. The prescription drugs had taken over. The sleepless nights, the paranoia, the weight gain that the jumpsuits could barely hide anymore. But behind all of that, there was still the man. The man who called his mother every day until she died. The man who gave Cadillacs to strangers. The man who cried when he sang gospel music because it was the only thing that still felt pure. That's who Ginger saw when she looked at him. Not the king, or not the legend. Just Elvis, a man who was scared and alone and running out of time. The house smelled like a hospital even though it wasn't one. There were pills everywhere, bottles lined up on the bathroom counter like soldiers. His bedroom was dark, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Elvis didn't like the light anymore. It hurt his eyes. It reminded him that the world was still turning while he was standing still. He had a concert scheduled for that night in Portland. Another show, another city. Another performance where he would have to pretend he was still the man from the 1968 comeback special. But his body couldn't do it anymore. His heart couldn't do it anymore. And somewhere deep inside, Elvis knew this was the end. The day started like so many others had that summer. Elvis woke up in the early afternoon, groggy from the pills he'd taken the night before. He came downstairs, his face puffy, his eyes distant. Ginger was waiting for him. She always was. They talked about small things. The weather, the tour, whether or not he should eat something before the flight to Portland. But underneath the small talk there was dread. Ginger could feel it in her chest like a stone. Elvis had been complaining about chest pains for weeks, shortness of breath, dizziness. His personal doctor, George Nishopoulos, had been prescribing him thousands of pills a year. Uppers to wake him up, downers to put him back to sleep, painkillers for the chronic pain that never went away. It was a chemical carousel, and Elvis couldn't get off. But he never complained. Not really. That wasn't his way. He joked about it. He made light of it. He told everyone he was fine, just tired, just getting older, nothing to worry about. Ginger knew better. She had watched him deteriorate over the 9 months they had been together. The man who proposed to her in January, who gave her a diamond ring and promised her forever, was fading. She could see it in the way he moved, the way he breathed, the way he looked at her sometimes like he was trying to memorize her face. That afternoon, Elvis told her he was going upstairs to read. He liked to read in the bathroom. It was one of his quirks. He would sit there for hours with a book, finding peace in the only room where no one could bother him. Ginger kissed him. She told him she loved him. He smiled at her, that crooked smile that had made a million women weak in the knees, and he said he loved her too. Then he went upstairs, and Ginger went back to their bedroom to lie down. She was exhausted. Living with Elvis was like living in a hurricane. You never knew when the storm would hit. Quick question. Have you ever had a secret that was eating you alive? Let us know in the comments. Hours passed, dead quiet. Too quiet. Too quiet. Ginger woke up around 2 in the afternoon and realized Elvis hadn't come back downstairs. She called out to him. No answer. She got up and walked to the bathroom. The door was slightly open. Her heart started to pound. She pushed the door wider and saw him. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Lying face down on the floor in his pajamas, his body was twisted. His face was pressed against the carpet. There was vomit. There was blood. Ginger screamed. She dropped to her knees and tried to turn him over, but he was too heavy. His skin was cold. His lips were blue. She screamed again, louder this time, and the house erupted into chaos. But this isn't where the story ends, because what Ginger Alden has kept secret for 40 years didn't happen after Elvis died. It happened before. Let's go back, just a few hours. The moment that Ginger has replayed in her mind every single day since 1977. It was earlier that afternoon. Before Elvis went upstairs for the last time, they were sitting together in the bedroom, and Elvis was quieter than usual. He wasn't making jokes. He wasn't talking about the tour. He was just staring at her. Ginger asked him what was wrong, and for the first time in months, Elvis told her the truth. He said he was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind of tired that came from living a life that wasn't his anymore. He told her he felt like a prisoner. A prisoner in his own body. A prisoner in his own fame. He said he didn't know how to be Elvis Presley anymore, and he didn't know how to be anything else. Ginger held his hand. She didn't know what to say. What do you say to a man who is everything and nothing at the same time? Elvis looked at her with tears in his eyes, and he said something that would stay with her forever. He said, Ginger, if something happens to me, I need you to know something. I need you to know that you made me feel like a man again, not the king, not Elvis. Just a man, and that's all I ever wanted to be. She told him nothing was going to happen. She told him he was going to be fine. She told him they had their whole lives ahead of them. But Elvis shook his head. He squeezed her hand tighter. He said the words that she would keep buried for 4 decades. I'm not afraid of dying, Ginger. I'm afraid of being forgotten. I'm afraid that when I'm gone, all anyone will remember is the jumpsuits and the drugs and the fat guy who couldn't get off the couch. I'm afraid they'll forget the music. I'm afraid they'll forget that I loved my mama. I'm afraid they'll forget that I tried. I tried so damn hard to be good. His voice broke. Tears ran down his face. Ginger Alden, 20 years old and completely out of her depth, held the king of rock and roll while he cried like a child. He told her he was sorry. Sorry for dragging her into his life. Sorry for not being the man she deserved. Sorry for being broken. And then he said the final words. Words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Promise me something, Ginger. Promise me you'll tell people I was more than this. Promise me you'll tell them I was a good man. Promise me you won't let them turn me into a joke, she promised. Through her own tears, she promised. Elvis kissed her forehead. He stood up. He stood up. He said he needed to go upstairs and read for a while. He said he needed to clear his head before the flight to Portland. Ginger watched him walk away. She watched him climb those stairs for the last time, and she never saw him alive again, because the next time she saw Elvis Presley, he was face down on the bathroom floor, and the king was dead. For 40 years, Ginger Alden kept those words to herself. She didn't tell the paramedics who arrived at Graceland that day. She didn't tell the doctors at Baptist Memorial Hospital who pronounced Elvis dead at 3:30 p.m. She didn't tell the reporters who camped outside her house for weeks. She didn't tell the fans who blamed her for not saving him. She kept her promise, but the world didn't keep its promise to Elvis. Within hours of his death, the vultures descended. The tabloids ran stories about his drug use, his weight, his bizarre behavior. They printed photos of him in his coffin. They turned his death into a circus. And Ginger watched it all happen, knowing that the man who had cried in her arms just hours before his death had been right. They were forgetting who he really was. They were turning him into a punchline. She tried to speak up. She gave interviews in the years immediately after his death. She told people that Elvis was kind, that he was generous, that he was scared and human and trying his best, but no one wanted to hear it. They wanted the scandal. They wanted the tragedy. They wanted the king to fall. So Ginger stopped talking. She disappeared from public life. She got married. She got married. She had children. She built a life far away from the shadow of Graceland. And she carried Elvis's last words with her like a weight she couldn't put down. But in 2014, something changed. Ginger Alden wrote a book. It was called Elvis and Ginger. Elvis Presley's fiancée and last love finally tells her story. And in that book, for the first time, she revealed what Elvis said to her in his final hours. She revealed that he wasn't the drugged-out, delusional king that the media had painted him to be. He was a man who knew he was dying. A man who was afraid of how history would remember him. A man who wanted to be seen as more than his mistakes. The book was controversial. Some people accused Ginger of profiting off Elvis's death. Others said she was lying, that she was making it up for attention. But the people who knew Elvis, the people who really knew him, they believed her, because those words sounded exactly like something Elvis Presley would say. He spent his entire life trying to prove he was more than a pretty face, more than a hip-shaking rebel. He wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, as a man, as a human being, and in his final hours, he was still fighting that battle. Ginger kept his secret for 40 years because she wanted to protect him. She wanted to give the world time to remember the music before they heard about the pain. She wanted Elvis to be remembered as the king, not as the cautionary tale. And maybe she was right to wait, because in the decades since his death, the world has come to understand Elvis Presley in a way they never did when he was alive. They've seen the interviews where he talked about his mother with tears in his eyes. They've heard the recordings of him singing gospel music in the middle of the night because it was the only thing that brought him peace. They've read the stories of him giving away cars and houses and money to people he'd never met. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977. But the man who died that day wasn't the man the world thought they knew. He wasn't the invincible king. He wasn't the rebel without a cause. He was a scared, lonely, broken man who just wanted to be remembered as good. And Ginger Alden, the woman who loved him at the end, she kept her promise. She told the world that Elvis was more than his mistakes, that he was kind, that he was generous, that he tried. The question is, did the world listen? Elvis's last words to Ginger weren't about music. They weren't about fame. They were about legacy, about how we remember the people we lose, about whether we choose to see them as human beings or as headlines. So here's the question for you. When you think about Elvis Presley, what do you see? Do you see the guy in the white jumpsuit? The guy who died on a bathroom floor? Or do you see the guy who changed music forever? The guy who loved his mama? The guy who cried when he sang "How Great Thou Art" because it reminded him that there was something bigger than fame? Ginger Alden saw all of it, the good and the bad, the king and the man, and she loved him anyway. That's what love is, seeing someone at their worst and choosing to remember them at their best. Elvis Presley wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He hurt people. He let his demons win. But he was also generous and kind and so deeply, desperately human. And unfortunately, they don't make men like Elvis Presley anymore.